Hey all, welcome to week 2. I'm going to do an introduction for this week. I'm not going to do these each week. You'll just kind of get used to the flow, but there's a couple of new things that I wanted to highlight. And I've got my notes over here, so I'm going to make sure that I'm following that. So first of all, what we're really going to be talking about this week is less content in the sense of global climate change, the title of the class, and more content kind of in the realm of science. And the reason that we're going to do that is that climate change, or climate science in general, has kind of a unique problem that not other realms of science have to go through. So climate science is super straightforward, and that's hopefully what we're going to explore as we go through the semester. But it does get caught up, at least locally, as in within our nation, as a political issue. And there's a lot of reasons for that. We're not necessarily here to get into the reasons. Generally, they have to do with money. And so there are people who essentially, as part of their identity, don't believe in science, which is like a weird thing, right? Especially we're going to spend some time this week talking about how science works. And so I wanted to kind of address some of that stuff. And again, one of the things that I hope that you come out of this class with, we talked about last week, is an understanding of being able to explain climate science to someone, or to yourself for that matter. So another thing we can think about is, in the realm of science, who gets to do science and how does it get done? We'll explore that in kind of a variety of videos. Generally, there's research that happens by professionals, right? And largely scientific research generally happens at universities. Different scales of research happen at different universities. There is kind of the top tier of what we call an R1 research institution. I believe that Boise State is categorized as an R2, so they're not an R1, but that's kind of the highest level. And when those professors, those researchers do science, they kind of put their findings in a manuscript, they write up something that hopefully kind of communicates their work, and that then goes off and has another life. And largely that other life is what we call peer review, which is anonymous. Every journal does it. We're going to do some investigations, and I grabbed a few videos from Nature, which is a research publication. And Nature, at least in the environmental sciences realm, so including biology, Nature is, believe it or not, kind of the top tier, right? So getting a Nature paper is a career-defining moment for most scientists, right? Some people really kind of top of their game might get a few Nature papers in their career. Some people might get one and use that as kind of their big moment. Others, most people never get a chance to publish in Nature. So we'll kind of look at that. And then another thing that always comes up is funding, right? Who pays for science? At least in our country, the vast majority of science is actually funded by the NSF, the National Science Foundation. Again, getting an NSF grant to do your work is tough. I've never gotten an NSF grant. I've been on 3 of them. The general rule in the sciences, no matter at what kind of echelon or what level you're operating, is 10 proposals and 1 funding, meaning you might apply for 10 NSF grants and get 1, over the course of a decade or so. Let's see, what else do I have here? Misinformation. So I will pull videos in from outside sources, but I want you to know that I've vetted them, right? So they're from reliable sources. Particularly, I like PBS Digital Studios, things from Nova, a couple of the Met Agency. They're out of the UK. They're kind of like NOAA, but across the pond. And so I will pull things together, but I'll pull them, knowing that we want a kind of viable and reliable source of information. So keep that in mind when you see kind of an outside source video. Yeah, I think that gets me through my first list here. The next thing I wanted to talk about is content for the week. So video quizzes, those are going to be there. You should be used to those now. The first one we're going to do is kind of how science works. We were going to do a video this week about kind of fact, hypothesis, theory, and law, and what those words mean in the scientific context. Often misused, often misunderstood, and of how peer review works. Another thing that I really think is beautiful, which is what we call the emergent truth of science, meaning that as all these researchers from around the globe and all these different institutions are kind of throwing themselves at the same problem, as they test these hypotheses, we organically see what we call this emergent truth. And there's a great video that describes kind of how that works and what that really means. Another interesting thing to think about is why we don't care about climate change, which is kind of how our bodies are really wired to deal with an imminent threat, right? If a bear is chasing you, you know what to do. You run, push your friend down, as they say. But it's really hard for us as a species to think about a problem in the future, something that's not directly affecting us. So again, the video will do a pretty good job of explaining that. Then the last thing I wanted to talk about is something that we're going to see each week from now on, and these are the reading quizzes. So there is a textbook for this class, and some of these reading quizzes will be out of the textbook, but some of them will also be chapters that I've brought in out of other books that I think are relevant. I use the fair use. There's the fair use doctrine, which means I can use one chapter out of a book for educational purposes for free. So I've scanned them as a PDF and put them in there for you. And what I assume that you're doing with reading quizzes is that you are, first of all, doing the reading before you start the quiz. That's super important. So you've done the reading, you've understood it. It's usually just a chapter, so it shouldn't take you longer than, 20 minutes. And then open the quiz. And so the quizzes are timed, and each of them has, 5 or 6 questions that I've written that Blackboard will randomly choose for you. But each question has some context clues. So if you've done the reading, I assume that you're reading the question and going back to the reading and finding the answer. So they're timed at 15 minutes, which is plenty of time if you've just done the reading. But what you're going to find is that it's not enough time if you haven't done the reading. And usually the questions are very specific, but they have a context clue, right? They'll kind of remind you where in the chapter to find that. And that also avoids people just trying to kind of Google some vague answer to make sure that you've actually done the reading. So I know that the first time you do one is going to feel a little bit wonky, but by the time we get to the end of the semester, you'll have those pretty well dialed in. So I'm not going to waste any more of your time. So this is just kind of a week 2 intro. And like I said, I'm not going to do one for each week. I just thought because we were adding the reading quizzes, I'd add those this week. So good luck, and I will hear from you soon. You'll hear from me soon as well. Okay.